Welcome back to the second episode of the Football on Football podcast. We're back with myself, Devin, and Lane again this week. Brock, our third partner, is still busy doing work, and we're hoping to have him on at the end of this episode, but we're not sure. So I guess you'll know when you hit about the midway mark or the point where there is no midway mark and we're done. But welcome back for another week. We're going to do another little recap of some Premier League matches from last weekend and a few preview of some of the big matchups this coming weekend, such as Everton, Man U, and Manchester City and Liverpool. Another busy week in the world of football, of course, and lots to catch up on. Cover some of the bigger games from last weekend, and we'll start off with your thoughts, Lane, on Southampton versus Aston Villa last week, where Villa lost their second game in a row in the Premier League campaign.
Well, it was obviously a high-scoring affair between the Saints and the Villains. Saw a seven-goal affair, lots of goals. Grealish getting on the score sheet once again late in the game, which was a little too late for Villa. They mounted a late comeback, but it was nothing too scare Southampton. It was too late of a goal. James Ward-Prowse showed up again, like always, with two incredible free kicks, but he's known to have that in his locker. And you get Vestergaard popping up with another goal, which, as a center back, scoring as much goals as he is this year is incredible. But with his height, like Van Dijk, you just expect more goals from him to come throughout the year.
No, for sure. There's definitely been a lot of goals seemingly coming from center backs this season from guys like Vestergaard, from Van Dijk before injury, from guys like Kurt Zuma. There's definitely been a lot of center back goals this season, and I mean, like you say, Ward-Prowse has proven that he's been clinical off the set pieces and scored the most off of them in the Premier League since I can't remember what the year is now, 2016, 2017. It's definitely been a good run, and yeah, 2 goals and an assist off of set pieces on the weekend. And it'll be interesting to see how Southampton are moving forward now with Danny Ings out for 4 to 6 weeks. Whether they change their shape or they add in someone else up top next alongside Che Adams, it'll definitely be an interesting dynamic for that team.
Yeah, it should be interesting to see. You never know, maybe Jempo or Shane Long might come back in, the old striker, the Ireland boy, and maybe he can get to a run, but he hasn't seen form for a long time. So hopefully they can find form without Danny Ings, but it's going to be tough.
Yeah, I mean, the last time Shane Long had any amount of form was a FIFA fitness card back in FIFA 19, and I mean, that wasn't a good card, and he hasn't been a good FIFA player in real life in a long time, and I mean, so I'd struggle to see him come in. Maybe Djenpo gets some minutes before he does, but it'll definitely be interesting considering Ings has contributed almost half to nearly half of Southampton's goals in the last year, and it's a lot to leave from that team. And considering their strong start, it'll be interesting to see if they continue or they take a little tumble down the table.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see them fall down a bit after losing a 20-plus goal scorer like Danny Ings. No one does well when they lose a player like that, and hopefully they can stay afloat and Che Adams can pick up the scoring and Ward-Prowse can keep on scoring, but it's going to be interesting to see how they do.
Talking about a team doing well without its best player or lack thereof, Liverpool picking up a win over the weekend against West Ham. Definitely didn't look without troubles at the back, but nonetheless only conceded one and held on to the win. What do you think of what you've seen so far without Van Dijk at the back for Liverpool?
They were shaky, especially in the Champions League with Fabinho, but Fabinho did look pretty good. Joe Gomez has honestly looked like the lesser of experience of the center backs, and he's should be the one leading the way, but he's looked very poor, especially against West Ham. He gave up a really bad goal, and the man of the match who came in, Nathaniel Phillips, was incredible on his debut for Liverpool. The 23-year-old really came in and rose to the occasion, and hopefully he can pick up form for them and really replace Van Dijk while he's gone, and maybe replace Joe Gomez when Van Dijk comes back into the starting lineup.
Yeah, Nathaniel Phillips definitely looked like the better center back on that day, and like you say, on that first goal, there was a combination of a bad Joe Gomez clearance and a very absent Trent Alexander-Arnold on the cross into the box. But yeah, Joe Gomez definitely didn't look great on the day. Obviously, like you say, they're obviously missing Van Dijk, and hopefully for them in a more near fashion, they're definitely missing Joel Matip as well, who's been quite good when healthy, but unfortunately, as we've seen in the last few years of his career, he just struggles to stay healthy. But when he's been able to get a run of health together, he's definitely proved to be a good center back. But it'll be interesting to see how the development of guys like Nathaniel Phillips go over the next few weeks, and see if they can hold it together.
Yeah, they're going to be an exciting outfit if Nathaniel Phillips can keep it up, and it's going to be interesting with that front three to see how Klopp wants to line up with them because it's been interesting in the Champions League with Jota and Firmino and all the talk going on. But it'll be interesting to see how that big signing in Jota can work his way into that lineup, and hopefully Phillips can hold the back line for a while until Van Dijk gets back.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see now. I mean, Diego Jota's been quite good throughout the season so far, and we'll get to that a little bit later on. But he's definitely been a great signing and performed much better than most would have expected, coming from obviously having a good season at Wolves, but playing at a bit above his level now. So we'll touch on that a little bit later. But continuing on, we saw similar to Aston Villa, Everton also pick up their second loss in a row now in the campaign, losing to Newcastle. Now, given they were missing a lot of players, but nonetheless, it was a tough loss for them to take.
Yeah, it's a very tough loss to take to a team like Newcastle. The Geordies haven't looked too great this season, especially against teams like Man United, who have really struggled this year, and other outfits, especially coming out with away win at draw at Tottenham, and that was a big draw which no one expected, and a poor penalty call from VAR again. But Everton have looked very poor recently, even though they rested some players, and which was expected. But with that kind of lineup, they should still be going out and beating a team like Newcastle.
No, for sure. I mean, definitely they were missing some players. They were without the likes of, on my list here, James Rodriguez, Digne, Richarlison, Coleman, Gabam, and Holgate, and also made a debut over Pickford. But nonetheless, they still started a strong side, and the fact that they weren't able to muster a goal until the dying seconds off Dominic Calvert-Lewin goal again, as he's been potting in goals all season, is just not good enough from Everton, and they're going to need to be able to do better than that without some key players to fight their way up to top of the table this season.
Oh, for sure. Like all the praise we give to Everton, you got to look at Newcastle, who's had a great game with some fantastic signings in the summer from Callum Wilson, and the man just can't stop scoring from Bournemouth. He's known to have injury problems and hardly scoring like big seasons, but he's really picking it up for Newcastle, which is great to see a English boy like Callum Wilson picking up and leading the lines for Newcastle, which they haven't done for a while since a guy like Alan Shearer, which they really haven't seen in a long time and really needed to come in.
Yeah, definitely. They definitely needed that number 9 up there. And it's nice to see on a sense of for Callum Wilson and for Newcastle. I mean, on one end you had Callum Wilson a couple of years ago banging in goals, looking to make a big $50-60 million deal to some of the likes as Chelsea he was rumored to go to. And on the other hand, you saw Newcastle bringing in Joelinton from Hoffenheim last season, and that just didn't work. And to be completely honest, I think most people saw that coming. You saw a guy with a couple of goals in the Bundesliga as a young kid bringing him over for $40 million. If you would have brought him in on a cheaper deal, it would have made a little bit of sense, but it seemed a bit much. But now to bring in Callum Wilson from the relegated Bournemouth of last season and to find back some good form is nice to see for the club and for the player.
Oh, it's a great thing to see for Newcastle. It's a big club with a lot of history, and they have some really key players in the squad, like signings like Jamal Lewis, Ryan Fraser. They haven't worked into the starting lineup yet, but he's been coming off the bench. Callum Wilson, Almiron's a great player. You still got Alan St. Maximin, who's an unbelievable prospect and should be getting shout-outs for the French national team soon. And you really think if they had a better manager than Stevie Bruce, they could challenge for top 10 places if they could get a better manager in for this club.
Yeah, definitely. They've definitely got some key pieces and some solid pieces in that team that could definitely make them a top half team. Whether that happens remains to be seen, but they've definitely got some key pieces there that they've added throughout the last couple of seasons that make them quite a good side for sure. As well, last weekend was a bit of again similar to the Man U Chelsea game the weekend before, where it was another big marquee matchup where you just didn't get much scoring. But again, Arsenal Manchester United, you saw Arsenal win 1-0 off of an Aubameyang pen, and other than that, Arsenal had a few chances, and you didn't generate much. It wasn't a very attacking game from a sides that both have good attacking fronts, but it was a pretty stagnant game for the most part. What were your thoughts?
Well, Man United played very poorly once again. They just didn't show up to play. They didn't have the passion. No one really looked like they wanted it. All they set up in a very defensive, progressive style of football with Fred playing defensive midfield, which really isn't his role, and McTominay played further forward in the rover, which they should have swapped roles to make it a better attacking outfit, but they really couldn't generate anything. Bruno had a poor game. Shouldn't have been a penalty in my opinion. I think it was barely any contact, and Aubameyang threw himself to the ground. I think the game really was won and lost on one call, and it was really a 0-0 game with a boring sleep fest, just like last game between United and Chelsea.
Yeah, that penalty was definitely a questionable call last weekend. As we could argue was the Callum Wilson one in the Newcastle game. It was definitely a weekend of some questionable penalty calls. Although that seems to be the theme in the Premier League since VAR was introduced last season. And sometimes it's a lack thereof, and sometimes it's why the heck are we calling this offside or whatever it may be. There's definitely been a lot of complaints, but that was definitely a game where you could have. I think a lot of fans, other than some biased Arsenal fans, would have said it should have been a 0-0 game. But nonetheless, Arsenal get the win out of it, and many continue to drop points so far this season and struggle to get points now, 8-5 if I'm remembering correctly, and it's tough. They hope to pick up form eventually. Looked good in the Champions League until midweek this week, and it's a weird one because they've definitely had some good performances as they did against PSG, but now they've had a fairly stagnant game against Arsenal and a game where they lose to Istanbul, of course, midweek. It'll be interesting to see how they can respond on the weekend against Everton.
Yeah, always looking in a lot of danger right now going to this game against Everton, especially losing against Istanbul. His 1-0 loss to Arsenal and a boring draw to Chelsea and two snooze fests in a row in a league, and he's really got to go for some games and start attacking teams. He's not defending like he has been lately against these bigger clubs, which he's known to have been defensive, but he's gotten win, he's gotten results. He's known to show up in bigger games. In the past two games, the Premier League and start of the season, he has not shown up, and he's got to pick it up, or the Glazers might start to bring in Mauricio Pochettino, which is looking to be a heavy talking point now in the media in England.
Yeah, it definitely does, and he's been out of the job for a while now. It definitely wouldn't be a surprise to many to see him pick up a job if that Manchester United job is a job he's interested in, which there does seem to be some amount of mutual interest from what we've heard, but that remains to be seen over the next few weeks whether we see any fruition to that.
Yeah, it could be interesting, and Pochettino really wants a job. You can tell he's waiting for that Man United job. It's Jan Vertonghen stated in the media a couple weeks ago that he knew Poch has been waiting for a big job in the Premier League, and there was three clubs he's wanted, and Vertonghen obviously didn't state which clubs because that'd be too much information to give out. But it's quite obvious he's waiting for that United job because he knows it's only time till it's gone.
No, for sure. I think it's inevitable that eventually he'll be able to step into that role, and if he wasn't waiting around for it, he would have stepped in another role elsewhere by now. So I would definitely imagine that you could see him in that role fairly soon if Ole Gunnar Solskjaer doesn't pull that team around pretty quick, which in my eyes I don't see happening at the current form.
Yeah, I can see the United team going on a run like Ole does. He gets close to the sack, and of course he somehow pulls a string of runs out of his back end, but he somehow does it. And I wouldn't be surprised if he does it again this year, but it's going to be interesting if he can do it with all the pressure mounting on him right now.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, everyone remembers the big comeback in Paris for Manchester United last year, but I think what probably isn't remembered by most people is if he lost that game, he probably wasn't a manager at that club for much longer. And we could, like you say, we could definitely see something similar to that this season where he gets in a tough spot and he goes on a run or gets a big result and things get flipped and the script kind of changes. But it'll definitely be an interesting narrative to see through the next few weeks because if we don't see many results from that squad in the next few weeks, I'd struggle to see him staying around for very long. But like you say, if he starts putting a good run together, he might buy himself another 6, 8, 12 months. So it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, for sure. You never know what he could do. Like last Christmas, a lot of United fans thought the sack's going to be before Christmas. And then he went on a run beating Jose Mourinho at Tottenham and beating Pep Guardiola. Saved himself a job, and then he went into Burnley, lost that game, which is quite obvious what happened there. Just blew it completely. 2-0 loss, couple screamer goals, and poor defending. And then later on, he went to sign Bruno, and then history changed from there and brought us to third place. And now he's gone on another crappy run. So you never know what can happen with Manchester United these days.
No, for sure. I mean, really, since Alex Ferguson has left, it's very much been a team that has very much been up and down through the course of things from Ole Gunnar Solskjaer now. We have the same thing with Mourinho. It's very much been a team that's had good moments but haven't been able to sustain anything of consistent success, and that's inevitably been the downfall.
Oh, no question. I couldn't agree more.
Last game from last weekend that we want to touch on is the Spurs Brighton game. It was a game in which it was Spurs' response to losing the Europa League to a side that they should not be losing to from the Belgian league. And so from response for that, then Mourinho said after the game, if he could, he wanted to make 11 substitutions at halftime. And well, he went about as close to that as he could in the next game, making 9 changes, with the only guys staying in the lineup being Hugo Lloris and Sergio Reguilon. Everyone else was changed, and they ended up winning 2-1 in a game where Bale got his first goal back with Spurs. And for a game, the first goal was Lamptey got his first goal in the Premier League as well, which I think was well deserved. But all in all, Spurs ended up getting a win, which they very much needed.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Spurs, Harry Kane obviously kicked them off an early penalty and in the 13th minute of the game and really got them started. But I think it was resilient to see Tottenham come back after that good goal from Terry Lamptey and have Gareth Bale finally score his first goal and get off the mark, which was much needed because there was pressure mounting on him already. Come back to his old club, and is he going to be able to do it? Is he still the same Bale? And he was able to put that goal away and get the win for Tottenham, and they were able to hold out and park the bus like Mourinho does against Brighton in the later stages of the game and get them to win and the 3 points that they needed and well deserved from this game.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you got a player the statue of Bale, even though he's been sitting with a mask over his face or taking naps on the bench for the last few months over in Real Madrid, and whether that was by him wanting that or not. Fact of the matter is, he's obviously been a world class player, and when he was last playing regularly, he was a world class player, and so there's obviously going to be a lot of pressure on him to continue to play on the pitch and hope that he can have a bit of a career still for Tottenham and prove to be successful and not have just died out in Real Madrid. So I hope that we can see a bit of the old Bale back in Tottenham. I'm sure at his age now it probably won't be at that same level, but there's obviously still a good player in there, and I hope that we can see some good performances from him this season.
Yeah, I'm sure that's something that everyone wants to see because Bale in the Premier League in years past was just incredible. And Bale at Real Madrid was just an unbelievable player. And if we can get anything of that player back, even 75%, we're going to see a Tottenham team that's going to be hard to beat. And they could be a title challenger, which we mentioned in the last episode.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely a very formidable attack that could definitely cause a lot of problems, and by that itself push themselves up the table for sure. Moving away from last weekend, we'll look forward to the coming weekend here. Definitely a lot more interesting matchups last weekend than we had the previous weekend, where we only really talked about the Man U Arsenal game because, fact of the matter is, wasn't that many big matchups. But it's a weekend of big matchups this week in the Premier League. Starting off with the biggest of them, with your first and second place of the last few seasons in Manchester City versus Liverpool. Although Liverpool is now without Van Dijk, so it definitely changes the dynamic.
Now, it should be an interesting game. You always expect Kevin De Bruyne to come out and dominate this sort of match because he's one player to rise to the big occasions, and we know him to be one of the best players in the world, probably top five, top four players in the world, and he can really shine in these occasions, and we hope he does and takes control of this game. And you might be able to see him pick out these his passes that he always does that no one else can see in the field, and he could really thread it to that through that Liverpool back two with Gomez and Phillips, the unexperienced back line, and he could really take this team apart.
Yeah, definitely. It'll be interesting to see how. I mean, Liverpool didn't look amazing defensively against West Ham last weekend, but I'll throw them against a Man City with, like you say, you have a De Bruyne, and then you throw the likes of a Mahrez in the game, or a Foden, or a Sterling, and it'll definitely make for an interesting challenge for that Liverpool back line to see if they can hold up against the best attacks or if they do struggle. But it'll be interesting to see. I could definitely see a Kevin De Bruyne picking apart that back line over the weekend.
Yeah, with Trent Alexander-Arnold back there too, such an attacking fullback. You only really got Robertson who you can rely on, and he's always a solid defensive player. But you look at Gomez, who's always inconsistent, newly player back there, Nathaniel Phillips. You never know what could happen with De Bruyne and all the attacking threats that you mentioned. They could just pull goals away on this Liverpool side, which even a team like Aston Villa did with guys like Jack Grealish picking up passes. So you could see the same thing again coming against Liverpool here this week.
Yeah, it could definitely prove to be an interesting game to watch for sure. It definitely will be a fair bit different than the Man City Liverpool matchups of old, but we definitely could still see Liverpool put up a fight. It'll be an interesting one to see. But moving away from that one, we have Manchester United team that now hasn't scored in the last two Premier League games, going up against Everton, who have come up in two losses in a row now after their hot start. Definitely a game that both teams will look to get back on track in the win column, but I don't know. It could definitely be another one where you see another low scoring game.
Um, I think Ollie's going to be forced to come out with an attacking lineup because he is under so much pressure from the fans, the media, the press, and everyone. And I think he's going to come out strong. He might start a lineup with Bruno and Pogba again, bring Pogba back into things. And you got Martial coming back in the lineup, put him up top, and Rashford back in the Premier League after his suspension against Tottenham and that red card. But without the pace of Martial and the pressing ability of Martial in the Premier League, United's really lacked that, and I could see them popping in a couple goals here, which they need to do against Everton because they just haven't scored enough goals this season in the Premier League.
No, they definitely haven't, and that's their main issue. And and I mean, the fact of the matter is that's where that team is built. Is that's what they thought their strength was the young attack, and if anything, they were going to be a little bit leaky at the back. And not that the back line's been superb this year, but if you have to say there's been something that's been lacking in the league this year, it's been their ability to score goals. And obviously, there was hopes to get Jadon Sancho in the summer, and that didn't happen. But most people still would have hoped that with Martial and Rashford and Greenwood and Bruno, you would have had a fair, good attack that could score a fair chunk of goals based on how they were playing at the end of last season. But it just hasn't gone that way so far this season. Greenwood probably hasn't got the playing time that a lot of people would have hoped or expected he would have gotten. And so far they just have been struggling to score goals. And like you say, I think they definitely need to, A, for the fans and the media, and B, for their own confidence, just to be able to get a few goals in the net. They need to be able to come out and play with a bit more of an attacking mindset next weekend and try and get some goals.
Yeah, for sure. I completely agree. I think Greenwood hasn't played much because of issues going on in the background with the England setup and stuff he's had in his personal life, which Ollie, I think, is trying to keep him out of things and keep his head more into the mental aspect of the game. But I think you got to touch on Everton here, who've also gone into this losing their last two games, which has been very interesting for a team who came out of the blocks so strong with their new signings and Dominic Calvert-Lewin. But they've lost their last two games, only scoring a goal against the likes of Newcastle and Southampton, who aren't really the biggest outfits, and you'd expect them to keep going on that run against those two teams, but they just didn't. And you question where the scoring power has gone in Everton's start here.
No, for sure. It's definitely been a bit of a change in the attack, and there's no doubt not having the two attackers on the side of Dominic Calvert-Lewin and Richarlison and James Rodriguez last week definitely played a part in that. Any good striker can be a good striker, but if it doesn't have any good service, then having Andre Gomez being one of your main providers is a heck of a lot different than having Richarlison and James Rodriguez. So it'll definitely be interesting once they get those two guys back to see if they can continue on that form. But they definitely need to try and get a little bit of that spark back from they had at the start of the season, because it wouldn't take much for them to have a run of bad games and not find that and kind of trickle back into typical Everton and fall in around mid-table.
Well, for sure, yeah. Like, we had people talking about Everton challenging for the league, which I think was nonsense. Even I said it a bit, but I think it was getting caught up in the media and all the heat with the new signings. Just a good run they went on, but they really didn't play anybody till that draw against Liverpool, where they showed that they had weaknesses. And without James Rodriguez and all this and the new setup that they had, it's looking weak. And once they bring in the bench, they don't look like the same outfit. And Everton, I think, need to come out strong just like United and prove doubters wrong here. And both teams might really try to go at it, or they could sit back and defend like they have past weeks. So we could see a snooze fest or a goal fest. It should be an interesting game.
Yeah, no, it definitely could be an interesting one. I hope for our sake it definitely leans a little bit more on the attacking end, but it definitely could be a one where it ends up being low scoring again for sure. So back to our point of Jota earlier that we made in the podcast. As we all know, Diego Jota has been absolutely tearing it up so far this season. He was definitely a good player for Wolves, no one doubted that. But some people would have saw the transfer fee that they got Jota for, and initially might have even thought that it was a little bit high. And I don't think anybody's thinking that anymore based on how he's played this season. He's been good in the league, even though he hasn't started that many games. He's been a very crucial sub for them. Scored their game winner last weekend, got a hat trick for them midweek in the Champions League. And meanwhile, we also have Roberto Firmino, who just hasn't been as effective as we would have, as most people would like in the last 8 or 12 months. And I know you get lots of people saying he's a pressing forward, he's a defensive forward, he's not your traditional striker, and that's fair, and I can agree with that. But nonetheless, the guy is still a striker, and he's filled up with goals in the back of the net when he has the chances. And when he's playing the Liverpool side, he's getting the chances, but the goals just aren't coming. And so I think there's a lot of people that are going to make the argument that Diego Jota should be starting in at Firmino, whether that means he plays the striker role or Mane plays the striker role, or they just play a fluid front three or whatever it may be. But that argument can definitely be made. I'm curious to see what your thoughts are.
Well, you got all your Liverpool bias fans who think, yeah, Roberto Firmino creates. He's your defensive forward. He draws back. He helps in the midfield. He creates all these chances, but he doesn't put goals in the back of the net, which is a big argument from neutral fans like myself, because I'm not a Liverpool supporter, and I think he doesn't cut it as a number nine. In which you look at, you need a striker to score the goals for you, and Liverpool are lacking that up top without Salah and Mane. And I think you got to stick Jota in there for the money he's cost, the goalies he's putting in. He's just been tremendous in his first couple games, and I think you got to give him some credit, and you got to throw him in there, and you got to mix up that lineup. And I think they should go with an interchangeable front three, play fluid football, and let the wingers move around as they like, and you'll create loads of chances and score more goals than you've seen Liverpool scoring in a long time.
Yeah, for sure. I can definitely agree with that. I mean, when I think of a fluid front three with those guys, I can not that it would have been necessarily the same effectiveness, but I think to back when we had injury problems with strikers and slash Alvaro can't talk Alvaro Morata being in poor form with Chelsea a few years back, and we had 3 or 4 games where Eden Hazard would play as a center forward with Pedro and Willian, and it just makes for an interesting dynamic when you have three skillful players like that. And so if you can have a front three of Salamane and Jota, it can definitely make for a promising attack in that sense. And I don't doubt that Roberto Firmino is still not a good player. I don't know if he's a striker. I don't know if he's a cam. Maybe he's just not right for that Liverpool setup. I'm not sure what the issue is, but maybe he just needs a bit of a okay. Here's Jota. Jota gets in the starting lineup for a few games. Now I start working harder. Maybe that doesn't happen either, but I think at least Jota needs to be given a chance, and Firmino needs to be given a bit of a warning to be like, okay, we got a new guy here, and if you're not going to perform, then your spot in the starting 11 just isn't here anymore, and it's not going to be a given because the fact of the matter was before they had on the bench they had Origi, who was good but not great and often injured. You had Shaqiri, who had his moments, but generally speaking hasn't played that much for that team as of late, and Minamino's had his moments, but also very much has had his moments where he hasn't been great. So they finally have an attacker in that team off the bench who's been promising and shown that they can be very, very valuable. And I think it's going to put a lot of pressure on Firmino to up his game, and if he doesn't, then he could definitely see his way out of that lineup.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think Firmino's really has the pressure on him, and I think Klopp's already laid the pressure on him with playing Jota as much as he did, and I didn't expect him to toss Jota in as quickly as he did with that front three. Everyone thinks is phenomenal, besides Firmino, who always comes under criticism, and I think Klopp's already put Firmino under pressure, and Firmino's got to pick up his game, and if he doesn't, I think Jota should be starting soon. And if that doesn't happen, I'd start to question what's happening there at that front three in the club.
Yeah, definitely. I think it at least has to be tried, and if you try it and they don't like it, then that's fair. But I think there's no way that you can't at least give that a try for a run of games and see what the level of success is with that. I think that's just a smart decision from a success of the team and from a managerial position, and to see if Firmino can then respond and help improve his game as well. I think it just makes sense from all sides.
Oh, for sure. I couldn't agree more with you.
Okay, well, I think that might be it for episode 2, and thanks for tuning out again, and we'll see you guys next week.
See ya.